Yes, I've initiated it.
So shall I go live?
No, just a bit, in a minute. Dr. Chiranjeev, start in 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, please start. And everybody, it'll be great if you can keep quiet for the 10 seconds. Thank you and good luck.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this virtual event. I am Dr. Chiranjeev Bhattacharya from UNDP India, and I welcome you all to this virtual event on the launch of the UNDP ICALL Helpline and the panel discussion on addressing psychosocial and economic needs of the vulnerable population using a human rights perspective to build back better. The UNDP ICALL Helpline is a collaboration between UNDP and the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and it is supported by the Government of Japan for COVID-19 response. The helpline will provide quality counseling services on various aspects, especially the psychosocial aspect to the vulnerable population, and will also provide information on the COVID-19 scenario, on the COVID-19 appropriate behavior. Further, the helpline is also expected to provide information on the referral and linkages to the various uh, social protection schemes, jobs and livelihood opportunities in 13 states of the country where UNDP will be implementing this project. Today is also the International Human Rights Day, and the theme for this year is Recover Better and Stand Up for Human Rights. So the launch of this helpline today will be a positive step in this direction to support the vulnerable and the marginalized to recover better from the pandemic. Today, we have amongst us three very special guests to grace the occasion. First, I would like to welcome Mr. Shingo Miyamoto, Minister, Head of Economic Section in the Embassy of Japan. Welcome, Mr. Miyamoto.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to welcome Ms. Soko Noda, Resident Representative UNDP India. Welcome, Soko.
Thank you very much.
I would also like to welcome Professor Surinder Jaswal, Deputy Director, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Welcome, Professor Jaswal.
Thank you.
Next, moving forward, we would request Mr. Miyamoto from the Embassy of Japan to kindly virtually launch the helpline. Mr. Miyamoto, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this honor. And I would like to just go ahead and declare this officially launched virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Miyamoto. Now, to take the proceedings forward, I would like to hand over to Dr. Aparna Joshi from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Over to you, Dr. Aparna. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chiranjeev, and a very warm welcome to our distinguished panelists. So before I introduce each panelist and start this discussion, let me set the context for today a little bit. This year's Human Rights Day theme relates to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it focuses on the need to build back better by ensuring human rights are central to recovery efforts. We'll reach our common global goals only if we are able to create equal opportunities for all, address the failures exposed and exploited by COVID-19, and apply human rights standards to tackle entrenched, systematic, and intergenerational inequalities, exclusion, and discrimination. So 10th December is an opportunity to reaffirm the importance of human rights in rebuilding the world we want, the need for global solidarity, as well as our interconnectedness and shared humanity. On the occasion of the International Human Rights Day and the launch of ICALL-UNDP Psychosocial Helpline, I wish to now invite our distinguished panelists to share their views on psychosocial and economic needs of the vulnerable populations and what are the ways of addressing the same in effective and integrated manner. So I first welcome the first panelist, Mr. Shingo Miyamoto, who is the Minister, Head of Economic Section at the Embassy of Japan in India since September 2019. He has a wide variety of professional experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, including economy, international safety and security, and political affairs at different duty stations such as USA and Indonesia. So I welcome Mr. Miyamoto, and my question to you today is, we are commemorating the International Human Rights Day, but it has a special significance today, particularly against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we would like to learn from you more about the steps that have been initiated by the government of Japan to address and support the economic needs, particularly of vulnerable population during the COVID-19 pandemic. What are these steps that would help towards a better recovery? So we would definitely like to know more about your views. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aparna Joshi, and Noda-san, my good friend from UNDP, and all my friends. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak at this auspicious event. This new facility, which is called ICALL-UNDP Helpline, is being set up by utilizing the funding that was provided from the Japanese government, UNDP, in order to cope with the COVID-19 crisis. We have earmarked a part of that funding to India, which is being used for this facility. I happen to be back in Japan right now for a health checkup, and I have been in Japan for 1 month. And I must say that after having lived through the COVID crisis in India, the situation here in Japan is much better, fortunately. In Tokyo alone, we are getting about 500 new infections per day, between 300 and 500, which is very low, but we are calling it the third wave here in Japan. Given the much easier, and maybe I shouldn't say easier, but better situation that we have here in Japan, we still are faced with these difficulties that certain individuals face due to the COVID-19 situation. Many of these things, I think, may be caused by the social isolation that is related to just going to work less, working from home more, seeing people directly less. But we are seeing the effect of this in the numbers, even in Japan, in such things as an increase in the rate of suicides, an increase in the rate of people who go into social isolation, and the such. So we are still faced with similar situations, and I'm sure as the situation is much more severe in India and other parts of the world, there are bound to be many people who will be faced with these types of, or are right now faced with these types of issues. And I think the only way we can cope with this is to provide these people with a way to speak with someone about the issues they're facing, and also a means by which we can provide them with the appropriate and the correct information. Because everywhere we go, we hear all these things about Corona, which may or may not be true, and we all have a difficult time figuring out what it is that we have to do as an individual in this difficult time to cope with the situation and also contribute to the society as it makes recovery from the COVID crisis. So this is not just in Japan or just in India, but it's throughout the world. And I think we have to work together to deal with the situation. We also have this issue about medical workers who are day in and day out fighting the crisis, but at the same time, they have to face issues like how do they prevent them from themselves from contracting the virus? How do they prevent their family members from getting it from them? And then they also have to, oftentimes, unfortunately, they have to face a certain level of stigmatization from society, even despite the fact that these are the people who are trying to help. Um, I can also understand how people would be afraid to be in contact with these people because these people are on a daily basis in contact with people who are positive. So everything like this is linked with human rights. And we all need to make sure that not just the people who are suffering, but as a society as a whole, we have access that this new facility will be put to good use. I hope many people will use it. And through this facility, we can help the people of India, especially those people who are vulnerable to situations like this, including the elderly, women, or marginalized parts of society who, in general, would have a difficult time having access to this kind of information. So with that, I'm just happy to be able to be present here in the launching event of ICALL-UNDP Helpline. And thanks to everyone present here for giving me an opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miyamoto, for your very, very crisp and very, very impactful sort of a message, talking about the impact of the pandemic as well as the social isolation on mental health of the general public, as well as of certain vulnerable communities, including women, elderly, or the health workers, and stressing the importance of support as well as correct information during these times, and the helpline can be the best way to sort of provide this kind of support. Thank you so much for sharing your views. And I now welcome actually Ms. Shoko Noda, resident representative UNDP, and she has been the resident representative in India since May 2019. She has been in charge of one of UNDP's largest country programs globally. She is leading UNDP's work for the SDG localization, climate change, and environment conservation, digital health and governance, and skilling. She's a strong advocate for climate action and gender equality. So my question to you is, what are some of the strategies adopted by UNDP specifically for addressing the psychosocial and economic needs of vulnerable population, for building a better recovery using a human rights approach? And that's very much against the backdrop of today being the International Human Rights Day. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aparna, and greetings to all the distinguished panelists and also participants. Pleasure to be here on this Human Rights Day. I would like to say happy Human Rights Day, but when we talk about human rights, I think it's often not really happy, but very, very, very challenging. And COVID is also becoming a severe human rights issue. It has exposed the inequality in the society, a vulnerability in the society, fragility in the society. So who are affected by COVID? They are, as Miyamoto-san said, women, the front line health workers, people without health insurance. For example, since Miyamoto-san is in Japan, I'm also Japanese. In Japan, everybody has health insurance, but here the health insurance coverage is very, very low, especially in rural area. And that's where also they do not have immediate access to healthcare centers. So it is human rights issues. Think about those informal sector workers, many of them. So they're the ones who are affected worse than some others. So we really need to apply human rights framework when we think of recovery from COVID. For example, health for all, education for all, access to water, access to food. We all should have equally those basic human rights. So it's pretty much human rights issues now. UNDP approach is not based on specific sector. Rather, we integrate different SDGs. We are quite flexible in picking up emerging issues. So often it's an issue-based approach rather than just sticking to one sector or one SDG. So this psycho support is, I think, is a good example of how UNDP also works. Yes, we do. We are working with Tata to support their helpline. It's also great to know that the receivers of call, helpline workers, can identify the caller's location or state, and it can guide them to the state guide or give them information about those social protection schemes. What kind of rights, again, do they have? So it's not only to talk about the mental health, but we are linking this issue with the livelihood. So that is very important. That's a typical, I think, approach of UNDP, and for that it's not only this help call line that we are setting up, but we have even in the psychosocial economic support, we are working also with the Ministry of Health to launch their campaign on stigma, and that is also together with different UN agencies, development partners, with WHO. We conducted a very thorough campaign again on mental health, mainly through social media. We are also supporting women and children. Domestic violence is another issue, so we are conducting some trainings. So we are not really focusing just on one issue, but on one sector, but bringing a different elements to make sure that those who are most vulnerable, their human rights are protected. This is the way that we are working. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Choco, for sharing your views. And you're absolutely right. Two very important messages that you gave. One is how COVID-19 pandemic has actually, while called an equalizer, has also sort of brought in social inequities that pre-existed COVID pandemic also. And therefore, I think it has brought the issues of human rights to the forefront. Another very important message that you talked about, which is to do with an integrative approach, because callers are not going to call us for different needs, but they will look for a comprehensive and integrated response as well. And therefore, this is the need of the hour, whereby instead of focusing on one issue, having this integrated approach, which touches upon several goals, I think is very, very important. And I assure you that Tata Institute of Social Sciences has a similar understanding of mental health, whereby we look at it as a psychosocial issue, and therefore need not only to provide emotional support, but also to link people to ground level services and help them with issues such as livelihood or other practical concerns. So thank you so much for sharing your views and giving us very valuable insights through your talk. And let me now introduce you to the third panelist, who is Professor Surinder Jaswal, Deputy Director of the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Professor Jaswal is also Associate Editor of the Indian Journal of Social Work, and She's a professor of social work at the Center of Health and Mental Health School of Social Work. She is a social work educator, public health researcher focusing on inequality, human development issues in health and mental health. She has researched extensively and has several publications. She's also on the board of several, academic as well as scientific ethical committees, and she has anchored many field action projects on community health, women's health, and disasters. Has worked at the ground level for many, many years and bridges the worlds of academics, research, and the field action in a very, very beautiful way. So I would request Professor Jaswal now to share her views on this occasion of Human Rights Day, as well as the launch of ICALL-UNDP. Surinder, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, noises at the back, I normally don't mute, therefore, yeah. Thank you, Aparna. At the outset, I would like to state that I'm extremely happy to be here at the launch of the ICALL Helpline funded by UNDP. Special thanks to UNDP and our Japanese colleagues, particularly the UNDP office in, I would say, in India, as well as the ministry, Japanese ministry. I must say that India has had a very long association with Japan, and earlier I have had the privilege of thanking my Japanese colleagues when they funded some of the work that we were doing in rural development in our Tulsapur campus, when we founded, farmers cooperatives and rural knowledge centers. So technology seems to be, something that Japan supports us in, and of course leads in. From the times of Nehru, I think India has been fascinated by the kind of development that Japan has always led in, and we hope to continue to collaborate with you. So many thanks for that. A very good morning to my co-panelists, Mr. Miyamoto, Ms. Loda, and the UNDP colleagues. It was a privilege to hear my co-panelists speak in such a succinct manner on this very, very complex issue of COVID-19. Frankly, Aparna, I'm not sure if I can be as crisp, so I will try and stay focused, because this is an issue, as Mr. Miyamoto said, which India has not been able to deal with as well as it should. Of course, the large population, the diversity of our population, the complexity of different states because of decentralization as well as resources has complicated the issue. So the uncertainty and difficulty which all of us have been facing since the pandemic, since COVID-19 hit the world, has impacted India in multiple ways. This particular panel, we don't have the time to go into those complexities, but I thought I would focus on something that's a little positive in these uncertain and difficult times. Positive as in COVID-19 has exposed, has brought forth, has visibilized the most marginalized, and has provided, I feel, an opportunity for us to revisit that which is required in order to provide both the necessary support for those who are marginalized to understand the complexity of issues that they face, as well as an opportunity for us as a nation state to be able to do what we can to address the inequities which Ms. Loda talked about, because I think that is at the base of all that is happening and all the difficulties that we are facing globally, of course, but in India particularly. I don't need to reiterate about marginalization. I think the print media and every other media has exposed what has happened in the last few months very well and has helped to visibilize that. What I want to emphasize is that COVID-19 and mental health, this double whammy, this double burden which is faced by the most marginalized, and therefore I would call it a triple whammy, is what actually has broken the back of people who are most vulnerable in our population. So COVID-19, as I said, provides us an opportunity, I feel, on a fourfold or a fivefold arena. The first one, to visibilize issues which now are coming out of the closet, which were there but which nobody was recognizing and everybody was closing their eyes to. So eyes wide open shut, literally, in the case of the marginalized and mental health. So we've been given an opportunity. We have in fact been almost not just given an opportunity, we are being forced to understand that the most marginalized and vulnerable have had a culture of silence which has surrounded the mental health aspects of what they face and the reasons for why they face what they face. The second thing it is allowing us to do is related both to mental health and marginalization, much more, I would say, to mental health and what we call psychosocial care, which is the stigma and discrimination, which is a correlate of mental health and which doubly invisibilizes the issues that are related to addressing it. So COVID-19 has forced us to look at this stigma and to be able to face it and say, this is what is creating not only for them, not only the others, not only the excluded, but also everybody. And it is important for us to address it. It has also pointed out the need, as Ms. Noda said, for a more holistic framework in order to address both the mental health needs of the population in general, and particularly those who are affected by COVID-19, and amongst them the most marginalized and vulnerable, and which in our country are a very large number. And when we talk about the marginalized in our country, we're talking about complexities of class, complexities of caste, complexities of gender, complexities of access to information. So people living, for example, in rural populations and who are additionally belonging to Dalit and tribal groups, and additionally, say, are women, and also, say, older populations, the elderly, you would find that they would be doubly, triply marginalized because also their access to information is almost zero. Which therefore brings forth the fact that access, when we talk about access even to minimum services and within that mental health, it would be almost non-existent. So COVID-19 provides us an opportunity for that. I want to point out here that when we talk about mental health, we're talking about the emotional impact on people. But emotional impact or the emotional aspects are not standalone. They are nested in the everyday of people's lives. In sociology, we talk about the everyday. And psychosocial care and support is a part of that everyday. And unless we address that everyday, unless we address what I come to as my next point, which is the structural inequities which have existed historically and which COVID-19 has brought to the surface, unless we address this, we will not be able to frankly address the psychosocial care and support needs of the marginalized, even understand them, even see them within the context in which they exist, and therefore provide the relevant and critical care that is required in order to be able to do what is needed. In all this, of course, technology, we have an opportunity to it. All the people that who are within class, the most poor people who are poverty-stricken, do not have the means to buy technology and therefore have access. The elderly who did not have technology when they were growing up and do not see it as a need. Those who are within certain class groups, etc., etc. So I think COVID-19 has provided an opportunity to bridge that technology gap, and through that bridge to be able to actually provide the basic human right needs of the most vulnerable population. So I see, frankly, COVID-19 as that bridge through COVID-19 exclusions to reach the rights, visibility, and rights per se to the excluded populations in India. I will not talk about it globally at this point. I think India is big enough at this point for us to talk about. I just want to say that, so if you look at this correlate of mental health and COVID-19, in 1993, the World Development Report for the first time exposed the burden of disease that mental health put, kind of imposed on people. For the first time, we recognized that productivity was affected because of the mental health morbidity that people faced. Earlier to that, it was only seen as crazy people, loonies, lunatics, and people not to be looked at and to be put away. For the first time, we realized that along with severe disorders, you also have common mental disorders, and everybody is vulnerable to them. To be mentally ill, to have a mental disorder is not an abnormality. It is a normality which all of us face. It is only the access to services, to supports, which helps us to both address and to be able to move on from it. And COVID-19 has brought that center stage. And earlier in 2005, when the National Disaster Management Act was brought in, disasters, and UNDP is well aware about it, and which is why I thought, let me bring that to the center. UNDP partners with India in order to provide basic support through SDMAs, through the state disaster management authorities, in order to provide psychosocial support to people who were affected by natural and human-made disasters. And I think COVID-19 is giving an opportunity to move to the next level, where we're moving from mental health to psychosocial care and support, enlarging the framework to a human rights framework by addressing one of the biggest inequities, which is, as we are saying, basic needs and access to information, and which the helpline is, I'm hoping, helping us to bridge. As I said, this is an area which I have lots, Aparna knows, lots to speak about, but I'm very happy to be given this opportunity and to put my 2 bits here, and happy that the framework is shifting and all of us have an opportunity to be part of that change. I think we should take this opportunity seriously and see that it is in the long run and not something that's only done in the short run. Because if we do that, then we will not really be addressing the structural inequities that ail the most marginalized population. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Jaswal. And I think, yeah, that was such a great way to end the panel, to end it on a positive note and look at COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity for creating some long-term changes, learning from, this pandemic and learning about structural inequalities and its very intricate relationship with the mental health, the everyday lives, and the mental health being nested within that. And unless we make some changes to those inequalities, it's very difficult to bring changes into the mental health of the general public, but specifically for the marginalized. So thank you so much for bringing that to the forefront. And I assure you that the helpline is definitely moving in that direction, whereby we too understand the need for an integrated response and not a standalone or a disorder or a deficit specific response, but a response which is nested not just in an emotional support framework, but also connects it to the larger class, caste, social identities, as well as structural issues that individuals are likely to call us with. So thank you so much for reminding us that this is an opportunity which you can use for a long-term transformation also. So with this, I thank all the panelists for their valuable contributions, for taking out in their respective fields, and very busy people. But I think it has been a great panel, and I think there's a lot of insight, not only for ICALL UNDP helpline, but I'm sure for everybody who is listening to this panel. With this, I would also like to take a few questions that have been asked by the audience, and some of those questions are specific to the helpline. So I would definitely take those questions for the simple reason they are, I think, about the nature or the services of the helpline. So let me first read out the first question, which talks about what are the specific services of the helpline. I think as the panelists have already shared that the helpline is a response to the need for an integrated service, which just does not provide merely emotional support, but does more than that. But ICALL has been functioning within TISS for past 8 years and running a technology-assisted psychosocial services at national level. And we have realized that such a service, which is now going to be initiated in collaboration with UNDP, has to offer minimum 3 kinds of services to people. One is an support space whereby people can talk about their stories in a confidential, anonymous, safe, and very, very supportive, validating manner. So that's the first service that will be provided. The second service, as Dr. Chiranjeev and other distinguished panelists also talk about, that people require information at the ground level, about COVID-19 pandemic, about what kind of prevention measures to use, what kind of health facilities are there, or practical support that they need in life. And that's the second service, which is providing information which is updated, scientific, and accurate to people. Also, I think we expect that that will serve in mitigating stigma and some of the prejudices that are also created around COVID-19. And the third thing that the service will facilitate is, as Surinder rightly talked about, that people's lives are not just affected by what is within them, but also outside them. The social realities keep impacting their mental health. So people require ground level support. They require knowledge about government schemes, livelihood options, legal aid services, maybe de-addiction services, some kind of shelters, safety options, protection options. So what kind of use this service will have if it doesn't link people to ground level services and follows up actively to ensure that people are linked, so that they will not only have control over their emotions, but they will have control over the determinants of their emotions, determinants of their mental health. So these are the kind of services which will be provided. I also want to assure, which is linked with the second question, how are we going to ensure quality of the services? I think one of the first thing is it is housed in an academic institution like Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which has been socially and community-wise engaged university since 1936. And this service itself is very conscious of the ethical as well as quality standards. The service is going to be run by trained professionals who have a minimum master's degree in psychology, and plus they undergo very, very rigorous training with ICALL. Secondly, there's active supervision, a team-centered approach that is provided, and most importantly, ICALL is going to do needs assessment, is going to talk to multiple stakeholders to understand who these callers are, what could be the possible needs, and to create robust referral strategies and referral directories to ensure that the most remotest location, and if a person calls from that location, we should be able to help that person regardless of their social identities and social locations. So it's going to be ongoing training, ongoing supervision, and most importantly, feedback from callers. Yeah, that is what we are looking for. Each call ends with taking active feedback. There is a rigorous documentation. There is rigorous continuity of services offered to callers, irrespective of who the caller is. And the caller can talk to us for as long as they want, as many times as they want, without having to repeat their story, right? And we will ensure that the caller continues to be with us until there's an effective response that is provided by us. And the last question that is asked is, what are the vulnerable population who will be reached through the helpline? And I want to assure that some of the vulnerable communities have already been sort of talked of in the panelists conversations, but we are definitely going to focus on a few and many more, because the helpline number is going to be widely circulated amongst these 13 states where UNDP continues to work. And these callers could be women survivors of violence, girl survivors of abuse and violence. These could be elderly. These could be people who belong to disadvantaged or lower socioeconomic strata, people migrants, people who are jobless, or it could be people living with HIV/AIDS. It could be people from queer communities. So it's actually vulnerabilities across caste, class, sexual, gender identities, people with disability also. And that also puts a responsibility on ICALL to be ready with, a range of services and understanding, first of all, how several of these social locations affect people mental health. How do these marginalized create disadvantages for people, and what kind of needs, socio-economic as well as psychological needs, they are going to call us with. So these are the questions, and I hope I have answered the questions. Um, are there any other questions, Chiranjeev or Jaiman, that we need to answer? Are there questions for the panelists also that we need to?
I think from mine is good.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Yeah. So once again, I wish to thank all the panelists for weaving this very beautiful thread. First of all, focusing on the psychosocial and economic needs of the vulnerable sections, the marginalized sections, and also definitely I think also highlighting that this is an opportunity for us to build a future for COVID-19 pandemic, building responses, integrated services, which not only respond effectively to the pandemic and its impact, but stay longer than that also. So thank you so much, and I hand it over to Kavya now for offering a vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kavya, and it is my privilege to propose a vote of thanks. On behalf of UNDP, I would like to thank the Honorable Minister, Mr. Miyamoto, for taking time off from his hectic schedule to be with us today. Your government's support in improving the overall effectiveness and impact of our COVID-19 response and recovery activities serves as an inspiration and encouragement for organizations across board to continue integrating psychosocial support in their humanitarian work during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. The idea behind this webinar was to sensitize our audience about the helpline service ICALL, a field action project of the School of Human Ecology, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which has been operating since 2012, to consciously reach out to vulnerable groups to address their unique challenges, including experiences of crisis, violence, discrimination, and stigma. The service is an important attempt to demonstrate how social, practical, and psychological aspects of COVID-19 pandemic can be addressed in an integrated fashion. I thank the Deputy Director of Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Professor Jaswal, whose tremendous work on health and ethnic conflicts, disasters, and public health policy has led to the conception of this facility. And I thank our resident representative, Ms. Shoko Noda, for leading UNDP's COVID-19 response work and for her constant support and encouragement to increase inclusion of mental health and psychosocial support in our work across sectors in India. Finally, I would also like to thank all the TIS and UNDP staff for their presence at this webinar, without whose help this event would not have taken off. So thank you very, very much for joining us today.